therapy, they basically just affirmed her and said, yes, you're trans, and this is all lovely and everything, you know. I mean, it's just incredible how everyone, I think, in society has been indoctrinated to a certain extent, just a little bit. You know, they've been groomed to accept this astonishing idea that someone can be born in the wrong body and just go with it and think that it's great. And for some reason, they're able to blot out the absolute horrific body modification surgeries and hormones that are part and parcel of this movement.
Hello, you're watching Gript Media. This is Fatima Gunning. Today I'm joined by a mother who's going to discuss her daughter's experience with trans ideology. Kathy, welcome to the studio.
Hi Fatima, nice to be here. So basically, I think it really started when she was 11, or maybe kind of 11 and a half, but she didn't actually come out to me as trans until she was 13 and a half. And she followed the usual trajectory. I mean, the story will be familiar to any parent that's been through this. First of all, overnight, her personality changed. She became miserable, withdrawn, lost all interest in school, and started self-harming. Then started self-diagnosing is another really common thing. So she'd go onto the internet and she'd self-diagnose from everything from PTSD to borderline personality, it's just everything. It was
and what were some of the kind of the websites that she was accessing when she was doing that?
Okay, look, I'm hands up here. I didn't take a very hands-on approach. Like, I would discuss these things with her and say, no, you're not, that's ridiculous, whatever. But I kind of thought back then that was enough, that I would discuss these things with her and tell her that, no, there was nonsense. To be honest, my hands were kind of full too, because it was extremely difficult dealing with her. She had severe ADHD, not without the H bit, with the hyperactive bit. So severely attention deficit disorder. She went on Ritalin finally when she was 12 for school. And she was also on the autistic spectrum, but she wasn't actually diagnosed until last year when she was just 14.
And because of some of the kind of sensitive issues in regard to this topic, you've asked us to conceal your identity to help protect your daughter's identity. But at what point did she start to kind of go down the trans part, and like, how do you think that happened?
I think probably from the age of 11 and a half she probably started. But also the other thing about it is it was social contagion. So all the kids she was hanging around with were all either non-binary, there were trans boys, demi-boys. There's tons of different names for all of these sort of things. Asexual, pansexual. They're all very interested in this area. And they all start off, it's almost like the same path they all take. They all start off with these various labels. Then they become non-binary. And then finally they all end up saying that they're trans. In my experience, from looking at what was going on like in secondary school at this stage, from these gangs of girls.
Yeah, and your daughter was referred to CAMHS, is that correct?
When she was in CAMHS for her Ritalin prescription. So that is the only place you can get. You have to see a child psychiatrist to get a prescription for Ritalin. So she was in CAMHS for that reason. But then the self-harming was kind of getting worse, and I wasn't that concerned about the non-binary and the trans, identity. She still had long hair at that stage, and she hadn't really changed her clothes that much. And I could see that all her friends were just flirting with this nonsense, as I put it. So I actually did not take it seriously at all. And I thought she got a few sessions with the CAMHS psychologist, and I relied on them to basically help me to understand what on earth was going on. I knew that autism was playing a big part in it, but I just wanted them to know, to get out of her what was wrong, get her to stop self-harming, and maybe knock some sense into her about this non-binary nonsense as well. So we went to CAMHS, and she had a few sessions with the psychologist there.
And what did they advise her? How did they advise her? As you said, you were expecting them to kind of, I guess, help her through it, but is that what actually happened? Well,
what actually happened is it's always a one-on-one. So you initially meet the psychologist, and then you leave your child alone with the psychologist or the psychiatrist, which actually is fair enough, but you are actually trusting them. You're placing your trust in professionals to help you, to help the family and to help your daughter. And what actually takes place is a thing called Affirmation. So Affirmation is where it's actually this idea that comes actually from America, that if a child comes in and says that they're trans, they're immediately affirmed, and the psychologist agrees with them. Completely, 100%, no discussion, no even exploration around why they might feel like this or any kind of factors that might make them feel miserable about their body. So she was affirmed at those initial meetings.
You've mentioned autism in your daughter's case, but there's also evidence that girls who've experienced things like sexual abuse, do have a tendency to kind of pursue a trans path. Did that happen in your daughter's case?
It did happen in my daughter's case, but I didn't find out about until she was nearly 14 at another meeting with CAMS, which I'll come to in a minute. But the autism, again, is worth going on about, because if you actually look at the figures that are collected by the Tavistock Clinic in England, they've done an absolutely appalling job with dealing with this in terms of affirmation and shoving kids down the gender path, but they've actually done a very good job in keeping records of what the cohort of people that are attending and so on. So it's a fascinating look into what's happened over the last 10 years with this gender ideology. And you can see that I think it's nearly 48% of kids, they're nearly all girls, are teenagers, 48% are autistic. And the thing about autistic kids is that, and autistic adults, I'm sure, they have this ridiculous respect for authority. If a professional tells them something, that is a gold stamp. And so when my daughter went in there and said she was trans, she wasn't 100% sure, but when a psychologist turns around and affirms her, that is just like saying, yes, you absolutely are. You don't need to think about this anymore. You are trans. So that's one other thing. The other thing about autistic kids is they are incredibly naive. They seize on ideas and they just won't let them go. And they're, I suppose you'd call it obsessive thoughts. This ties in perfectly to someone getting indoctrinated, which is basically what happens. Back to the sexual abuse, I didn't find out about the sexual abuse until she was nearly 14, and it was another meeting with CAMS, and this time the meeting was to do with autism. And I had actually been led to believe that this was the start of getting her an autism diagnosis. And when I turned up to the meeting with my husband, it was the most bizarre thing. It was almost like almost like an ambush. So the meeting, where we were talking about autism and everything, but it was straight in. They're very, very interested in Aisling's trans identity. So that kind of was trickling through the meeting with the pronouns and the name, but really the meeting was about autism. At the very end of the meeting, Aisling came back in with one of the psychologists, and she said that she had been sexually abused when she was 11 by a friend over a period of a year. So then the discussion switched. This is just in the last 5 minutes of the meeting. It was just, oh my God, Aisling has had, some sort of inappropriate sexual contact. At that stage, we didn't know who was responsible. And then the other thing was that all three psychologists turned around and started giving out to myself and my husband again, because we weren't sufficiently affirming and we weren't sufficiently supportive. And at that meeting, we were all kind of a bit shocked, I have to say. But after that meeting, the main psychologist there wrote 3 letters. One was to the school, one was to this kind of out of service or out of school support service for autistic kids, and the third letter was to Aisling's GP. And I just couldn't believe the content of those letters. First of all, they used the he, him pronouns the whole way through. They used her trans name, and they made all these recommendations for the family to get on board with her new transition.
And what would that have involved?
Well, I mean, you can have a look at the letter afterwards, but to get on board is basically to affirm, to accept her new identity, and maybe get ourselves along to some education camp or other, like Transparency or something like that. We were told to contact Belong To and Tenny for support as well. For
them to kind of guide you in how to raise your own child?
Well, exactly, to get us to stop being so transphobic or whatever, and just, get with the programme. So
even questioning your daughter's assertion that she was trans was seen as transphobia, is that?
Well, they wouldn't actually say the word, but it was definitely, I felt extremely undermined as a parent throughout the whole process. And I know that other parents have felt the same thing, because I went on to a focus group subsequently with ADHD Ireland, and they were all kind of saying the same thing. I felt very undermined because, and Aisling told me this later, she said that she would be abusing me, giving me a real hard time behind my back, obviously, with one-on-one with the psychologist. And the psychologist would be nodding along and kind of agreeing, and not actually saying, well, maybe your mother isn't abusive, maybe your mother is concerned about you, which I think really should be the right way to go. And I really think that driving a wedge between parents and their children is not the recommended thing to do in one of these like therapy situations. I'd be shocked if I found out that was the case, but that certainly is what's taking place.
And what was categorised as abuse? Was it, again, just the kind of not affirming or questioning, or...?
Well, now, when I say abuse, that would be what my daughter would be calling me. She'd be saying, I'm an abusive parent, and I'm not safe, which is the type of language that they are coached to use on the internet. So, Aisling, this was during COVID. So, during COVID, basically, they didn't go to school for nearly 2 years. So, they're at home, and you have a teacher online, and your child is supposed to be doing lessons. So, I was running up and down the stairs like a jailer, checking on her to make sure that she was doing her lessons and that she wasn't cutting. So searching a room for blades and making sure that she's doing her lessons. And obviously, like she half the time she wasn't doing her lessons. A lot of the time she'd be on the internet, hours and hours and hours of it every day. And there was the worst thing on the internet, I would say, are the influencers. So there's these, I suppose they're trans-identified girls, usually kind of like late teenagers or early adults, and they just make YouTube after YouTube and loads of TikToks, and what they're doing is basically indoctrinating young girls. It doesn't take very long. I mean, a few hours in some cases is enough for these girls to go, oh my God, that's what's wrong with me. I'm trans.
And would those influencers, would they usually be kind of people who had gone down the hormone path and had surgery and that kind of thing?
Most of them have done the whole thing, and then they post these videos, and a lot of them in fact will post progress videos of the surgery that's taken place, and they won't actually show photographs because it'd be too unbelievably gruesome. They might show some top surgery scars, like maybe 6 months after it's happened, maybe in a soft lighting with a little bit of, makeup even. They just lie to these children. They don't tell them the full truth about the impact, the side effects of these hormones and surgeries. One is phalloplasty and the other is metoidioplasty. The complication rate is probably 100%, but there are no statistics kept, and if they are, I wouldn't believe them.
I've heard that with the male bottom surgery, that because the body thinks or that it's injured, that
keeps on trying to seal itself.
It keeps on trying to kind of seal itself closed. But what exactly happens in the
well, there's two. Now I have to say that girls are much more likely to get phalloplasty or metoidioplasty. For some reason, girls seem to be much more indoctrinated. The numbers are much higher for these trans girls. It's like a form of elaborate self-harm or something. It's just gruesome. But the two types of bottom surgery, which, as I say, not everyone will get because the failure rate is shocking. One is they construct a fake phallus, and usually from the skin of the forearm, they would just draw a line above your knuckle there, below your elbow, and take a roll of flesh off, including muscle and blood vessels and nerves, and they will roll it up like a sausage and basically stitch it to your pubic area. And then they will try to get a functioning urethra so urine can pass through this. And you can just imagine the complications.
I'm thinking of the scarring, it must be quite...
The scarring, the arm is left looking like it's been burnt, like a burn victim. They do a skin graft over it, but literally you can see the bones and you can see the flesh. It looks like something, it's horrifying looking, I have to say. That. So not only are you destroying your genital area, but you're also damaging another perfectly healthy part of your body. But the main problems they have obviously is urinating, and the goal is to urinate standing up. This is the goal that they want. But to get the urine to pass down through this artificially constructed urethra, that the body is. It's almost like they're experimenting. And
you told me previously that your daughter has actually, come out of that kind of frame of mind. And how is she now? And how did that happen? How did she come out of it?
Well, she's absolutely fine now. And one of the ways I actually got her out of it was basically by spelling out to her that you cannot actually transition from a girl's body into a boy's body. It is not physically possible. Those surgeries are so far from delivering you with a functioning penis. And actually, I will tell you something quite funny. I mean, her idea of what she was going to get at the end, she thought she would actually end up with a functioning penis that would actually work. She had no idea of the mechanics and the hydraulics and how the whole thing operates. She'd been completely lied to. But she was completely lied to about all of the surgeries and all of the hormones. She really thought it was as easy as just going on tea, and then you'd get this amazing burst of energy and you'd feel great, and you would get a lovely beard. There's no mention of just take testosterone, which pretty much they will, if you're trans long enough and if you wait long enough, you will definitely go on this. Just tea in its own, the side effects are, okay, so first of all, your body hair is going to start to grow. You will almost definitely get a good beard going there. You'll also get receding hairline, hair loss on your head. You will get very masculinized, your features. You'll look prematurely aged. But that's all just the superficial cosmetic side of things. But what's actually going on inside your body is where the real damage is taking place. Like, you can up your cancer risk by just untold amount of times. And you have to bear in mind that when we're talking about testosterone, we're talking about steroids, which is what we would be used to talking about in the gym. And you just know like how much you're warned against that. In fact, I find it quite hilarious that this book here, This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson, he's actually a trans-identified man. He used to be a gay man when he wrote this book, and he has a huge section here all about steroids and why you shouldn't take them and all the side effects. And yet, it's perfectly fine to give them to teenage girls who would have only trace elements of this normally in their body. And I suppose one of the things that testosterone does is it actually damages the sexual organs of girls. Increases the cancer risk so high that after about 4 years they have to generally get a hysterectomy because the risk of cancer is so high, and they have to also get their ovaries removed. And it also interferes with their urinary tract whole area, and basically things change down there.
Because a female body is not supposed to have that much testosterone in it.
No.
Or a male body, if the person is transitioning from male to female, wouldn't be supposed to have that much estrogen. So
I'm not I'm not an expert on any of this, but I certainly don't know as much about men taking estrogen. But again, it's not good for them. Like, the cancer risk alone is many times magnified. I don't think it's quite as damaging though, but I could be wrong in saying that. But for girls, the most life-limiting thing is that it enlarges muscles, and one of the muscles in your body is the heart. It enlarges the heart, and that's the risk really of keeling over from a heart attack.
Did you have reason to believe that your daughter was being kind of, I suppose, steered towards the path of maybe puberty? Well, I suppose at that time she was 11, was it?
When she came out to me, she was 13 and a half, and then she was 14.
So would that be too late for puberty blockers at that point? Or?
No, not at all, no.
Okay.
It wouldn't have been, but what the pathway in Ireland is that if kids would go to CAMHS would basically send them to Crumlin Children's Hospital, where there would be visiting psychiatrists coming over from the
satellite clinic. Is
exactly.
That right? Yeah.
So the Tavistock would send over their medical professionals, and they would basically treat the kids. But we do know from an article that came out in the Times UK about a couple of weeks ago that pretty much every kid that went to the Tavistock was given puberty blockers. So I think those 250 Irish children have been sent to the Tavistock, and you can guarantee that most of them will have been put on puberty blockers. But even if you don't go through the Tavistock, you can buy all of this online anyway. You can either buy it online, and there is a place where Mary Butler was telling us all about. I think on Sunday there was an article by Mark Tighe where Mary Butler met with the doctors from the National Gender Service, and they were discussing what medical pathway children should be, or not medical is the wrong word, but I suppose what treatment pathway children in particular should be put on in Ireland now that the Tavistock has been closed due to safety concerns. And Mary Butler apparently recommended that Ireland could use Gender GP, which is a service that's now run out of Spain, I believe. The two doctors have been struck off the medical register in England because of their unsafe medical practices, in which a child actually died who I believe was under their care. So what I'm saying is that even if you don't go through the official channels through like Crumlin and the Tavistock, you can actually get these things online. Was
your daughter Aisling asking for the hormones, or what kind of, I suppose, physical treatments were they recommending for her, or was she pursuing with them?
Well, certainly, now CAMHS certainly weren't doing this. CAMHS were just affirming, which was bad enough. But Aisling was getting all her information from the internet, what to buy, where to go, and so on. So she knew it all way before I did. She was going on about puberty blockers, testosterone, followed by top surgery, then bottom surgery. She had it all lined out, what she wanted to do. And the first thing she wanted to do, and she begged me until I actually gave in and bought one. I bought a binder, and you can buy them on the internet. They're about €40. And when it arrived, I took one look at it and threw it in the bin. And then I did a tiny bit of research about it, and it was so horrifying what a binder
just
actually
for
does.
people who might not be familiar, the binder, it's a device to kind of flatten the girl's chest so she has a more kind of masculine looking chest. Is that correct?
It looks like a bulletproof vest, but extremely tight, like a cross between a corset and a bulletproof vest. It's that kind of shape, and it's just tiny, but what it actually does is it squishes, just squashes the breast tissue almost into the ribs and flattens it. And they're in terrible pain. They're in pain. They're told not to wear it for more than 8 hours a day, but they're in pain for those 8 hours. When they take it off, they're still in pain. And I've heard that up to a year after kids that have used these intensively, they're still in pain. And their ribs are definitely affected. So there was only one girl I know that actually is still wearing a binder, and her ribcage is deformed. She still wears the binder even though her ribcage is deformed, and she has breathing difficulties. But you hear about all sorts of damages from this. And generally, I have seen photographs of girls that have worn these binders for about 3 years and their breast tissue is totally deformed. But again, they're recommend, like on the websites and everything, they're told, don't worry about that, just get top surgery. That'll fix that problem.
They're telling them not to worry about like the possible deformation of their kind of chest area because they're just going to kind of remove it anyway.
Exactly. And what they're talking about when they talk about top surgery is actually a double mastectomy. So they will just cut off the breasts and kind of try to shape them. They take off the nipples and they put them back on in an area to make it look kind of more natural. But you're left with a thick scar running underneath both your breasts, and sometimes if you're carrying a bit of weight, the scar will run straight across your chest, like in a big thick one. It's about like a centimetre. Now it does fade with time, but it's so obvious if you see it, what you're looking at.
I think one of the interesting arguments about the kind of transgenderism is that if we'll call it gender dysphoria, I think that's kind of recognised as being a condition that some people experience. But if it was something like body dysmorphia related to an eating disorder, and if somebody was suffering from something like anorexia and they were under the impression that they were overweight or something like that, you wouldn't kind of say, oh yes you are, please eat less. So why is it in this particular instance that instead of kind of helping the child or the adult to kind of get their mind to be kind of more at peace with their body, why it seems like they're being driven down a road or led down a road where they're being asked to physically alter their body to suit their mind? One of
the ways of looking at this, and in fact the way that was presented to me in CAMS, is that it is someone born in the wrong body, basically. It's like a religion. It's like we're all born with a gender soul. So we have our sex bodies and we have this essence, which is either male or female or non-binary or maybe even fluid that floats around. It's called our gender essence. So it's basically just a belief system. The other way, the reason it's taken such a grip in society, I think, is that it's presented as a civil rights movement. It's like, it's the next gay, we were so mean to the gay people, so now we have to kind of make amends and do this right this time. And it's clearly not a civil rights movement. I mean, gay people just wanted the same rights as everyone else. They just wanted to be treated with respect and dignity. And I think they succeeded, because I have to say, I just don't care. It doesn't bother me in the slightest if someone's gay or not. I don't even think about it. And that has to be the very definition of acceptance. Whereas the whole trans agenda, they don't want rights, they want privileges. And the other thing that sometimes they come across is they do have this pseudoscience. They'll try to make out like that, a trans person's brain is slightly different. And they have tried with their scientific studies to prove this, and they have failed. The scientists have never been able to prove that there's any difference, because there isn't a difference, because it's a belief system, it's a cult. And the way I say it, the reason I say it's a cult is because when I look at what Aisling was taught on the internet and the way she was controlled, people think, how can it be a cult? Because there's no cult leader, obviously it's not like the Moonies, it's not like Scientology. And actually, why are those cults so damaging to the people? Because they're totally controlled. And in transgender ideology, particularly the teenagers, they are totally controlled. So Aisling, for example, would be told what to say, what to wear, what to do with her hair, her clothes. She'd be coached what to say to parents. She'd be taught she was totally controlled by fear as well. She was absolutely terrified that she would be attacked on the street because she was trans. The trans are the most vulnerable. They're murdered every day. They're abused. So she was afraid of anyone that was cis, because she'd be in physical danger. She was afraid of her parents. She was told to fear her parents. because they didn't understand and they'd resist.
Is this coming from kind of online stuff?
Online coaching, yeah. And also her peers, they'd all be saying this as well. She's told, don't trust and don't trust anyone except the trans family, basically. So when she initially got sucked in, just like all of these teenagers, they're love bombed initially, which is a real cult tactic. But once they're in there, they follow the rules. Otherwise, the punishments are pretty severe. So they're constantly checking themselves to make sure they're not saying anything transphobic, and they're snitching on their mates, like if they say anything transphobic. I think a lot of detransitioners who I've seen online, people like Chloe Cole or Richie Herron, they've spoken that, like you said, like when they were kind of entering into that frame, that they were embraced and it was all love and kindness and sweetness and your home. But as soon as they started to kind of draw back and was like, or question anything,
was this right for me? They were kind of shut out, and it was like, no, there's no.
I'm glad you brought up detransitioners and Richie in particular. I've just unbelievable sympathy for that poor guy. So just for anyone that's listening, it was a young man. He actually didn't transition until he was kind of in his mid-20s. Yeah. And I think around the age of 30, he actually went for a full vaginoplasty. So now he's left with urinary problems. He's in constant pain. His life is ruined. I feel so sorry for him. And that's another thing I will say. Like if you want to know about Scientology, like who do you talk to? Do you go and interview the chief Scientologist like they do here in Ireland, like Tenny and Belong To, or do you talk to a detransitioner, someone who's been in and been out the other end and can tell you the truth? And why is it treated differently to Scientology? Why is it treated differently to, like, for example, female genital mutilation? Like, I have no respect for that. And yet the respect that's given to this cult, it's astonishing. And the way that it's infiltrated everything, all the government organisations. Sure, I even brought in a copy here of the LGBTI national strategy about how they're going to indoctrinate people further, gender neutral toilets, etc., etc. And the only reason I can think is that it has this respectability. And I think if everyone realised that it was a cult, it wouldn't have this. The rose-tinted glasses would come off and people would see that it's a body modification cult, and it's run not for the benefit of these poor children. They're like the sacrificial victims, really, in the whole thing.
Attention has been drawn to, I think there's an argument on the kind of the pro-trans side that people have always kind of been trans in these numbers, and it's now because of kind of societal acceptability that they're like coming out and becoming visible. But there seems to be a lack of, if that's the case, there seems to be a lack of kind of more middle-aged trans men. Is it females who identify as male?
The main people that are benefiting are the older men that transition later in life. They're generally transvestites, and they have a name for them. It's called autogynephile. So an autogynephile means kind of love for oneself or whatever. So generally these men, they start off cross-dressing, they're married, have children, whatever, and they just really get into it, and they're getting a sexual thrill from dressing as a woman and imagining themselves as a woman. There's I think there's say 2 or 3% of men will have this kind of urge, and if it gets out of control, and obviously they're watching an awful lot of porn, that doesn't help. So they're watching porn, dressing as women, getting this kind of thrill. And they often talk about this thing called gender euphoria. And for teenage girls, that just means that they're happy that someone has, used a boy's pronoun for them or something. It's very innocent. For these older men, it actually means that they're getting a boner from a validation. So they seek out situations.
If somebody calls the adult male
or accepts them as a woman. So, for example, they will seek out situations where they get validated, and that's why they don't just want to pee. This is what they say about when they want to use ladies' toilets. They don't just want to pee. They want to go into ladies' toilets because they're getting this kind of thrill of validation of being accepted by as a woman. And women's sports. I mean, no one is stopping them playing sports. There's no law saying trans people can't play sports, but trans identified men, they want to play in women's sports because it gives them that validation.
Do you know specifically what it was that helped Aisling kind of come out of the trans frame of mind?
Well, once I realised that she was indoctrinated and that it was a cult and she was totally controlled in this way, I realised just by going on the internet, it took me about a few hours of a search, and then I did a lot of research into the whole thing, and I looked at a lot of the videos that she was looking at to see what exactly she was being taught. And what I did basically was I one of the books I bought, it was called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier. I underlined a few passages, and I would just engage her in conversation, and I would say, I'd like to learn more about, you know, this whole trans thing, and what do you think about this? And I just told her the truth. It was as simple as that. And honestly, it only took, I'd say, probably maybe 6 hours, 10 hours, spread over maybe a couple of weeks of conversations. Just telling her the truth, mostly about the gruesome operations and the side effects of drugs, but also about all the lies she'd been told.
And were those kind of possible negative side effects and things, those were not discussed with her previously, like when she was in kind of therapy and that kind of thing?
No, absolutely not. In therapy, they basically just affirmed her and said, yes, you're trans, and this is you know, this is all lovely and everything, you know. I mean, it's just incredible how everyone, I think, in society has been indoctrinated to a certain extent, just a little bit. You know, they've been groomed to accept this astonishing idea that someone can be born in the wrong body and just go with it and think that it's great. And for some reason, they're able to blot out the absolute horrific body modification surgeries and hormones that are part and parcel of this movement.